Sometimes the people we trust the most leave the deepest wounds. That's the bitter truth Evelyn Monroe faced one rain-soaked night in Los Angeles, a truth wrapped not in fury, but in quiet devastation. Life has a brutal way of teaching us what love is not. Evelyn Monroe never imagined she'd be signing divorce papers while carrying the child of the man she once believed was her forever. Yet here she was, legal documents clutched in hand, awaiting her husband's return. After a night with his mistress, Billionaire returns home. Pregnant wife hands him divorce papers. Evelyn Monroe never imagined she'd be signing divorce papers while carrying the child of the man she once believed was her forever. Yet here she was, legal documents clutched in hand, awaiting her husband's return. After a night of lavish indulgence with another woman, Carter Langston, a self-made millionaire admired in the elite circles of Los Angeles, had always walked the fine line between ambition and temptation. As storm clouds rolled over the city skyline in the early hours, Evelyn's heart thudded with cold resolve. Each tick of the clock sounded like a countdown to the end of everything she had built with him. Every dream, every promise, crumbling in silence. The fairy tale had shattered the moment she discovered his betrayal. What followed would be a journey of heartbreak, painful revelations, and a woman's fierce reclaiming of her self-worth. Evelyn Carter had dreamed of a storybook life since her teenage years growing up in a quiet coastal town in Oregon. Her world had been modest: backyard barbecues, town festivals, and slow walks under maple-lined streets on Sunday afternoons. But beneath that small-town charm burned a drive for more. She'd earned a scholarship to a top West Coast university and moved to the heart of the entertainment capital, Los Angeles. It was at an exclusive charity gala during her junior year that she first crossed paths with Carter Langston. Back then, Carter was a rising entrepreneur trying to carve a place in LA's competitive luxury real estate scene. Evelyn had been volunteering that night, working the event as part of a scholarship fund committee. She wasn't part of the glamorous elite, but Carter saw something in her. With natural polish and quiet confidence, he introduced himself. She was drawn in by his wit, his charm, his presence. He made her feel seen in a room full of glittering strangers, and for a girl who'd grown up invisible in a small town, that attention was intoxicating. They started dating soon after, and their first year together was a whirlwind of candlelit rooftop dinners, long drives along the Pacific Coast Highway, and impromptu escapes to Malibu. By the time Carter closed his first major luxury real estate deal, a multi-million-dollar development in Venice, Evelyn stood firmly at his side. She brought calm to his chaos, offering a steady counterbalance to his intense ambition. Friends often said she was his grounding force, but even then, a voice deep inside whispered warnings she chose to ignore. But even then, the signs were there. Carter loved attention. He craved recognition. He aggressively pursued high-profile investors, frequently attending glitzy parties that lasted until dawn. Carter always insisted it was just part of doing business, and Evelyn took his words at face value. She wanted to believe that his hunger for success was simply the natural drive of a visionary. If he sometimes came home late or carried the faint scent of perfume she didn't recognize, she chalked it up to the unpredictable world of high-end real estate networking. She convinced herself it was nothing, clinging to the image of a man who once whispered his dreams into her ear while they watched sunrises in bed. Denial became a refuge. They had married in a lavish ceremony at the Fairmont Century Plaza. The event caught the attention of lifestyle blogs and magazines, featuring stunning photos of Evelyn in a custom-designed gown and Carter beaming like a man who had everything. Their honeymoon in Tuscany seemed to seal the promise of a lifetime together. But once the wedding glow faded, the cracks slowly began to show. It wasn't just the missed calls or the last-minute schedule changes, it was the way Carter started looking through her instead of at her, as if she'd faded into the backdrop of his empire. Carter's work hours became more erratic. Phone calls at odd hours, always framed as sensitive business negotiations, started happening more often. At social gatherings, whispers circulated about Carter's alleged indiscretions. Every time Evelyn raised the subject with gentle concern, she was met with vague replies and condescending reassurances. Now, sitting alone in their penthouse in Westwood, 5 months pregnant and exhausted, Evelyn began to see those faint warning signs for what they really were, flashing red alarms. Tonight, she would face the truth. She would no longer pretend. The penthouse, perched above the LA skyline, was a symbol of Carter's meteoric rise. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views from the Hollywood Hills to the distant shimmer of the Pacific Ocean. But tonight, that view only deepened Evelyn's sense of loneliness. Outside, the city thrummed with life. Inside, her world stood still. The marble floors beneath her felt cold, impersonal, as if the home she'd helped decorate now belonged to a stranger. She sat curled on a velvet chaise lounge, absently tapping her fingers on her growing belly. Each flutter of the baby reminded her that every choice she made from here on out would shape another life. Midnight approached and Carter was still nowhere to be found. "Do you think he's okay?" Her best friend Naomi Lynn had asked over the phone earlier. Naomi, who had known Evelyn since their high school days in Oregon, was the keeper of her secrets. "Or is he just, out again?" Evelyn had forced a laugh. "He's fine. Probably locked in negotiations with some investor. Or that's what he'll say anyway." But deep down, Naomi's words scraped against Evelyn's darkest fears, that Carter wasn't in some boardroom, but in someone else's arms. The rumors she had long dismissed suddenly felt all too real. She remembered, 2 months ago when he returned home from a business dinner at nearly 3 a.m., his shirt wrinkled, his breath laced with wine, and a floral fragrance clinging to his suit that wasn't hers. When she questioned him, Carter brushed her off with a weary sigh and a wave of his hand. "This is how deals are made, Ev. Don't be dramatic. This is how deals get done, Ev. Don't be paranoid." The words echoed in Evelyn's mind, even as her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her spiraling thoughts. She glanced at the screen, praying it was Carter, but instead it was a message from her close friend, Brianna Ellis. "Saw Carter at Vesper Lounge. Not alone, not an investor. Be careful." Evelyn's hands trembled. Brianna wasn't the type to gossip. If she had sent that message, it was because she was genuinely concerned for Evelyn's well-being. The baby kicked gently, a sobering jolt that made Evelyn close her eyes as tears brimmed. This has to stop. Her resolve solidified like steel. "My child deserves better." "So do I." She rose slowly and made her way across the cool marble of their Westwood penthouse to the master bedroom. Inside the walk-in closet, tucked behind her row of designer handbags, was a manila envelope she had prepared days ago with her lawyer. Divorce papers, only needing her final signature. She had prayed it wouldn't come to this. But tonight the truth stood unshakable. Carter Langston had made his choice. And come morning, she would no longer be the compliant wife waiting for a man who had already left her in spirit. At precisely 3:17 a.m., Carter stepped out of the private elevator into the dimly lit foyer. The chandelier above cast ghostly reflections across the polished floor. A dull throb pulsed behind his eyes. Too much champagne, maybe. He adjusted his tailored navy suit, trying to cover the lingering scent of gardenia on his collar, a fragrance that didn't belong to Evelyn. Slipping off his shoes to avoid making noise, he turned toward the living room and froze. She was already there. Evelyn stood partially cloaked in shadow near the grand piano, her posture tense, arms resting protectively over her pregnant belly. For the first time in months, Carter's smooth facade wavered. "Evelyn, why are you still up?" he asked, attempting a steady tone. She didn't answer immediately. In the dim light, he noticed the wariness in her face, the quiet fury just beneath the surface. That image, her robe, her bare feet, her rigid stance, was a harsh reminder that she was carrying the child he had once sworn to cherish. "I couldn't sleep," she finally replied, voice flat, brittle. "I was worried about you." The words felt stiff and unnatural, stripped of their old tenderness. She didn't move toward him. If anything, she seemed braced for impact. Carter forced a grin, the one he used in boardrooms when masking bad news. "I told you, sweetheart, business ran late. You didn't need to wait up." But inside her gaze, he saw more than fatigue. He saw fury, betrayal, and heartbreak on the edge of eruption. Who was she? The question snapped through the silence like an electric current. A flicker of alarm darted across Carter's face. "What do you mean? I was in a meeting," he stammered, trying to gather himself. Evelyn shook her head slowly, tears shimmering in her eyes. "Don't lie to me. Her voice was low, tight with restraint. She stepped closer, eyes locked on his shirt. "I can smell the perfume, and I can see the lipstick, right there." She gestured toward the faint red smudge on his collar. Her hands trembled, but her voice sharpened with rising fury. "The rumors, the excuses, the sudden absences, all of it points to one truth." Carter opened his mouth to spin another lie. But the resolve in Evelyn's tear-streaked face knocked the breath out of him. The image of Vesper Lounge flashed in his mind, glasses clinking, a stranger's lips pressed against his, and soft whispers he never intended to honor. In that moment, he knew there was no more hiding. His silence was all the answer she needed. Evelyn pressed her lips into a thin line, her shoulders squaring. "We're done, Carter." Her voice wavered, but her conviction did not. "I've reached my limit." She turned from him, walking toward the kitchen counter where a folder sat, waiting like a final sentence. Carter's heart dropped as his eyes caught the unmistakable stamp of a legal firm. He'd always feared this day might come, but not like this. Not this soon. Not this final. Evelyn held out the divorce papers with trembling hands. This wasn't just a mistake, not just one more slip-up to be smoothed over in the morning. This was the unraveling of everything they had once believed in. The manila folder seemed to burn under the recessed kitchen lighting, glowing like a cruel verdict. Carter stood frozen, overwhelmed by a wave of regret so forceful it nearly buckled his knees. Evelyn, her composure now glass-thin, laid the folder on the marble island, flipping open the front to reveal the first page. "Complaint for divorce." The words stared back at him in cold legal clarity. "Evelyn, wait. Let's talk," he pleaded, his voice suddenly raw. "We can fix this. Don't do anything drastic." She turned to him, eyes clouded with sorrow but devoid of hope. "Drastic? Carter, I've tolerated your lies for months, maybe years. I gave you every chance." Her gaze dropped briefly to her swollen belly. The grief in her eyes sharpened. "We're about to bring a child into this world, a baby who deserves parents that respect each other." Shame burned through Carter's chest. He had stood behind podiums, proudly sharing his journey from humble beginnings in Inglewood, working 3 jobs through college, building a network from scratch, clawing his way into Los Angeles' elite real estate scene. But somewhere along the way, in the climb to power, he had lost sight of everything that mattered. He reached for her hand. She recoiled. The space between them felt wider than it had ever been. "We can go to therapy," he said desperately. "Dr. Naomi Carter, didn't your friend recommend her? She helps couples. We could try." Evelyn's bitter laugh cut through his desperation like a blade. "It's too late, Carter. You think I haven't begged for this before? Begged you to let me in? Begged you to explain why you keep vanishing into the night?" Her voice cracked, but she didn't falter. "You brushed off every concern I ever had." Carter's mouth went dry. His mind reeled back to all those nights Evelyn had quietly pleaded with him to slow down, to just stay home, to choose her over another networking event or champagne-fueled night among LA's elite. He'd told himself he was doing it for them, but now he could see how she'd watched him slowly disappear into that glittering world. Every promise he broke had brought them closer to this moment. Her eyes shimmered with pain. "I can't let our child grow up in this. Lies, infidelity, constant doubt." With trembling hands, Evelyn flipped through the folder's contents, stopping on the pages outlining asset division, future custody once the baby was born, and the legal grounds for dissolving their marriage. "Sign it. Don't sign it. I don't care anymore. But I'm filing for divorce." Carter's mind spun. He imagined the press. Headlines, business backlash, whispers in boardrooms. But louder than all of that was the reality crashing down on him. The woman he had once promised forever to was ready to walk away for good. And the worst part? He couldn't say she was wrong. Evelyn stepped away, putting the wide-open space of the penthouse's living area between them. Her breaths came in shaky pulls as she tried to still her nerves. She had envisioned this confrontation so many times, had practiced the words in her head until they felt memorized. But nothing could dull the sting of saying them out loud. Carter, motionless by the counter, felt like the ground had vanished beneath him. The man known for dominating real estate negotiations, making million-dollar decisions without blinking, was paralyzed by a sense of powerlessness he'd never known. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came. Then a buzz. The sound came from the coffee table. His phone lit up, a series of texts flashing across the screen. Evelyn turned, and her eyes followed the glow, her expression twisted. She didn't need to see the names. That flicker of light said everything. She swallowed hard, blinking back tears she refused to shed. "Do you even realize," she said, her voice shaking with fury, "that this is the worst time you could have done this to me?" Her hand instinctively cradled her belly. "I'm carrying your child, Carter." Her eyes met his, begging, not for excuses, but for truth. "Is there anything you could possibly say that would make this betrayal hurt less?" Evelyn's voice hung in the room like broken glass. Carter's shoulders slumped. He took a hesitant step forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know," he said. "I know I was stupid, Ev." His eyes dropped to the floor. "I let everything spiral, business, success, the attention. It swallowed me whole, and somewhere in that chaos, I lost sight of what actually mattered. You. Us. Our baby." Evelyn scoffed, folding her arms protectively over her chest. "Now you realize that?" Behind her, the lights of Los Angeles glittered through the glass walls of the penthouse, their sparkle cold and indifferent, like the city itself was bearing witness to this unraveling. "All those nights I stayed up waiting. All the times I begged you to be honest," she continued, her voice sharpening. "And now you think a last-minute confession is going to fix this?" Carter stepped closer. There was the faint glimmer of tears in his eyes. "I've ruined our marriage," he said, his voice cracking. "I know that, and I hate myself for it." His tone turned desperate. "But if there's even a sliver of a chance, if there's anything I can do, tell me." Evelyn's chest constricted. The part of her that still loved him, that once dreamed of forever, longed to collapse into his arms and pretend this nightmare could be undone. But life had taught her otherwise. She steadied her breath and summoned a mask of calm. "I have no illusions left, Carter. We're done." The words hit him like a wave, and he visibly deflated, like a balloon losing air, the weight of reality crushing in. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. The luxury around them, the curated art, the sleek furniture, the sweeping cityscape, now felt like a cold, silent jury, passing judgment. Evelyn slowly reached forward and closed the folder containing the divorce papers. She inhaled deeply, locking her resolve into place. Tomorrow she would take them to her attorney. She would sign. She would begin again, without Carter Langston. And for all the remorse weighing down his frame, Carter knew deep inside, he may have crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. That night, Evelyn found no sleep. By 5 a.m., she had given up entirely and stood before the towering windows of the penthouse. She watched as dawn stretched its light over the city, smearing the sky with pale pinks and quiet golds. A gentle reminder that life kept moving forward, even when hearts stood still. She rested her hands on her belly, whispering soft words to the child growing inside her. "I promise, little one, you won't grow up in sadness." Carter had slipped away to the guest bedroom hours earlier. But Evelyn doubted he slept either. She could still feel the weight of him lingering in the silence. There was a heaviness pulling at Evelyn's chest, like gravity itself had turned against her. Each step through the silent penthouse felt heavier than the last, the manila folder in her hand pressing down with unbearable weight. By mid-morning, she'd summoned a car service to take her across town, to a quiet apartment in Santa Monica, where her longtime friend and confidant, Naomi Lynn, lived. Naomi opened the door with wide eyes and instant worry, immediately wrapping Evelyn into a warm embrace the moment she saw the tears streaking her face. "Oh, Ev," Naomi murmured, guiding her inside. The apartment was modest, cluttered with postcards from global adventures and coffee table books stacked in every corner. It was a far cry from the sterile perfection of Evelyn's penthouse. But the comfort here was real, and it embraced her in a way marble floors never could. Evelyn sank into the overstuffed sofa, exhaling shakily. "I couldn't stay there," she confessed, her voice thin with exhaustion. "I filed for divorce, or I will. The papers are done." Naomi's eyes widened slightly, but her voice remained steady as she reached for Evelyn's hand. "Finally," she said softly. "I know this is ripping you apart, but you've been suffering for so long. You and that baby deserve better." A single tear slipped down Evelyn's cheek. "I wanted to believe he could change, that we could find our way back." Her voice cracked. "But every time I gave him a chance, he used it to break my trust again." Naomi gave a quiet nod. She had long seen the late nights, the excuses, the hollow reassurances. She had known, even when Evelyn couldn't admit it to herself. So, what now? Evelyn placed her hand protectively on her belly. I have to think about this baby first. I'll stay here for a few days, if that's okay, until I figure out the next step. You're not going anywhere, Naomi said without hesitation. Stay as long as you need. Then she paused, brows tightening in concern. Have you talked to your attorney? About custody, support? Carter might try to twist things to his advantage. Evelyn flinched at the thought. She knew too well how Carter's wealth could influence outcomes, how charm and power could bend perception. I will, she promised. I won't let him dodge his responsibilities. But I don't want our baby growing up in a war zone either. I'm torn. As she curled deeper into the couch's warmth, Evelyn felt the smallest flicker of peace. Naomi's unwavering support gave her the strength she needed to face what was next. She had made the first move toward freedom, even if it meant walking straight through uncertainty. Less than 24 hours later, Evelyn stood in the glass lobby of Harrington & Fields, one of Los Angeles' most respected family law firms. The modern decor, polished marble floors, clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, echoed the cold luxury of Carter's world. Everything about this place screamed control, wealth, precision. Her heart thundered as she approached the reception desk, clutching the manila folder tightly to her chest. A sharply dressed assistant guided her into a sleek corner office, its windows overlooking the humming city streets below. Evelyn was greeted by her attorney, Rachel Torres, a composed, sharp-eyed woman in her early 40s, widely respected for her formidable work in high-stakes family law. Rachel stood as Evelyn entered, offering a firm but kind smile as she gestured to the sleek leather chair across from her desk. Evelyn, she began, her voice warm but clipped with professionalism. I'm truly sorry you're going through this. I've reviewed the initial paperwork you sent over. She slid a few pages across the desk. Given Carter's financial portfolio, we're in a position to petition for substantial alimony and child support. Evelyn nodded slowly, a hard lump rising in her throat. Her fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted the edge of her sleeve, a small movement that betrayed the storm brewing just beneath her calm exterior. I'm not out to ruin him, she said, her voice low. But he's shown he can't be trusted, not with money. Not with honesty. I need to make sure this baby has everything it needs, no matter what. The words clung to her throat, heavy with the weight of every broken promise, every lonely night she'd endured. Rachel leaned forward, folding her hands neatly. I completely agree. Our next step will be to formally file the petition for divorce. We'll cite infidelity as the grounds and include any documentation or witness testimony you have to strengthen the claim. Evelyn's mind flashed to the texts and photos she'd received from friends, Brianna among them, clearly implicating Carter's behavior. She hated the idea of dragging private pain into a courtroom, but this wasn't about pride anymore. It was about protecting her future. I have a trail, she admitted softly. I never wanted to use it, but it's there. Her voice cracked at the edges. It felt like admitting defeat, even though it was a step toward reclaiming her strength. Rachel nodded with understanding. We'll need everything: bank records, property deeds, prenatal documents, anything that outlines your current financial and medical status. Are you planning to stay with Naomi while we begin? Evelyn brushed a tear from her cheek. Yes, for now. I can't go back to that penthouse, not with him there. I just can't. Rachel's face softened. I completely understand. But keep in mind, unless a judge orders it, Carter technically has the right to remain in the marital home. Emotional separation doesn't always carry legal weight. Evelyn blinked hard, absorbing the reality that she might still be tethered, at least legally, to the very space where her heart had been shattered. Evelyn's chest tightened. The scope of it all, the paperwork, the loopholes, the battle ahead, was overwhelming. So what do I do now? She asked quietly. Right now? Rachel didn't hesitate. We'll file for temporary spousal support and exclusive use of the penthouse. You're pregnant. Your emotional and physical health is a priority. The court usually weighs that heavily. Evelyn exhaled shakily, gripping the manila folder like it was the only thing tethering her to the room. All right, she whispered. She inhaled slowly, then spoke with quiet finality. Let's do it. With that, Evelyn signed the retainer agreement and passed the completed divorce petition across the desk to Rachel. A strange wave washed over her, a mix of cautious relief and looming dread. This was it. She was stepping into a legal battle armed not just with counsel, but with hard-earned clarity and an iron will. The next challenge wouldn't be paperwork. It would be Carter himself. How he would react once he realized she was done waiting, done forgiving, and fully prepared to hold him accountable. Back at the penthouse, Carter Langston was unraveling. He paced the pristine floors in restless loops, every polished surface reflecting his frustration back at him. The phone, silent now, sat like a cursed object on the marble kitchen island, a reminder of every reckless text and hidden call. The quiet of the apartment was oppressive. Even the low hum of the AC or the muted pulse of traffic below sounded unnervingly loud. By midday, Carter knew he had to act. He picked up his phone and called someone he'd once trusted, Atticus Hart, co-founder of the same high-powered legal firm Evelyn had just retained. Carter, however, had worked with Atticus before, but in real estate and corporate negotiations, not family law. As he stared out at the LA skyline through the towering glass windows, the call connected. "Carter," Atticus answered, a trace of concern in his voice. "I heard things are complicated right now. How can I help?" Carter swallowed hard. His throat felt dry, his voice hoarse. "I need the strongest defense possible," he said. "Evelyn's pregnant, and she's leaving. I messed up, Atticus. I really messed up, but I can't afford to lose everything." There was a brief silence as Atticus absorbed the situation. "Is there any chance of mediation?" he asked finally. "Can this be resolved without going to court?" Carter closed his eyes and pictured Evelyn's tear-filled face, the cold certainty in her voice as she slid the divorce papers across the counter. "I'd like to believe that, but no. She's serious. She's already with Taurus's office. They're known for being aggressive, especially in custody and spousal support." Atticus sighed. "All right, then we prepare for the worst and quietly hope for the best. First, I need a full breakdown of your financials, all property, liquid assets, trusts, investment portfolios, stock options, everything. We can't give them any room to claim you're hiding assets or acting like a flight risk. Judges don't take kindly to that." Carter raked a hand through his hair, the weight of it all crashing down like a tidal wave. He thought back to all the times he'd boasted about how tight and in control his finances were. Now every bit of that could be used against him. Now it felt like Carter's world was slowly coming undone. "I'll send over my financials," he said. Atticus paused on the line. "Carter, prepare for a battle. If Evelyn has documented proof of infidelity, that could heavily influence the judge's ruling on alimony and custody. But if you can show you're remorseful and committed to being a responsible father, it might soften things." The word father struck deep. Carter winced, remembering the last sonogram appointment he'd missed. Evelyn had gone alone. He, on the other hand, had been at Vesper Lounge with a woman whose name he hadn't even committed to memory. "I'll do whatever it takes," he murmured, jaw tightening. "I won't let her walk away without at least trying to show I can change." When the call ended, the silence of the penthouse settled around him like judgment. The same walls that had witnessed his rise were now a cold reminder of everything he'd neglected. Haunted, he picked up his phone and stared at Evelyn's contact photo. A sunlit moment captured on a beach, her face glowing with laughter. His fingers trembled as he typed. "I'm sorry. I'm here. Please, let me be part of the baby's life." He hit send, fully aware that remorse alone couldn't undo the damage. Across the city, Evelyn sat at Naomi's kitchen table, her tea long gone lukewarm. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down, Carter's name flashing across the screen. She read the message, apology, regret, and a plea to be present for their child, and felt her chest tighten. A storm of emotions swirled, anger, sorrow, a small but painful flicker of sympathy. Slowly, she turned the phone face down and set it aside. Naomi, stirring oatmeal at the stove, glanced over. "He's not backing off, is he?" Evelyn shook her head. "He says he's sorry, that he wants to be involved." Her voice broke slightly. "But I don't know if I can believe that anymore. I'm tired, Naomi, so tired." Naomi crossed the room and wrapped her arms around her. "It's okay to feel that. You've carried this burden alone for too long." Evelyn leaned into the hug, one hand resting protectively over her belly. Each soft flutter reminded her, This wasn't just about heartbreak. This was about safeguarding a future, her child's future. She sighed. Rachel says the next step is to move forward with the formal filing. Serve him the papers. She also mentioned a restraining order if he starts showing up or tries to force contact. Naomi frowned. Do you think he would? Evelyn hesitated. Carter had never laid a hand on her, but she'd seen the intensity, the temper, the sharp edge he sometimes showed in high-stress business moments. I hope not, she whispered, but I'm not taking any chances. I know, Evelyn admitted quietly, but I've seen how cutthroat Carter can be in a negotiation. This might be no different. They fell into a heavy silence, each lost in thought. From the open window, the soft hum of Los Angeles filtered in, the faint blare of a horn, a passing conversation, the steady rush of traffic. The city moved on in its relentless rhythm, completely indifferent to Evelyn's private unraveling. Have you told your mom yet? Naomi asked gently. Evelyn shook her head, guilt pressing at her chest. Her mother, Margaret Monroe, still lived in the quiet coastal town where Evelyn had grown up. She adored Carter, had treated him like the son she never had, always gushing about his success to neighbors and friends. I can't bring myself to do it yet, Evelyn whispered. She really believed I found my fairy tale. Naomi gave her a sympathetic smile. Better to tell her than let her hear it from someone else. You could probably use her support right now. Evelyn nodded slowly. She would need her mother's steady love more than ever in the days ahead, especially with the legal storm looming. But for now, she needed to gather herself. Focus on staying grounded. She sipped the last of her now cold tea, silently rehearsing how she'd hold her composure when things escalated. When paperwork turned into court hearings and real estate appraisals and custody negotiations. No matter how sincere Carter's remorse might seem, she wouldn't compromise the future or safety of her child. 2 days later, Los Angeles delivered one of its rare downpours. Sidewalks glistened with rainwater, and umbrellas dotted the streets like moving shadows. Evelyn, determined to keep her scheduled prenatal appointment at Mount Sierra Medical Center, braved the storm beneath a sleek black umbrella. Her pulse quickened with anxiety. This was the first appointment she'd attend alone. In the early days of her pregnancy, Carter had been there. He'd held her hand, asked questions, smiled at ultrasound images. But now, by her own choice, he was gone. She stepped off the bus near the hospital entrance and took a breath, trying to still her nerves. Inside, the fluorescent lighting cast everything in a harsh clarity, and the quiet murmur of check-ins and paging systems gave a strange illusion of normalcy. Evelyn approached the reception desk and gave her name. Then she sat, ignoring the curious glances of others in the waiting area. A few looked familiar, faces that had likely seen hers in the glossy pages of lifestyle magazines. The Langston marriage had been glamorous, public, the rumors of its unraveling even more so. A nurse eventually stepped into the waiting room. Miss Langston, she called, slightly stumbling over the name. Evelyn stood, her cheeks warm with discomfort. That name might not be hers for much longer. She followed the nurse into a quiet exam room and eased herself onto the paper-covered table. Her hands rested gently on her belly, the subtle flutters inside reminding her of what mattered most. Soon, Dr. Naomi Carter entered, an experienced and compassionate obstetrician who had seen countless women through the trials of pregnancy. Just seeing her familiar face was a balm. A few minutes later, the exam room door creaked open, and Evelyn's stomach dropped. There, just behind Dr. Carter, stood Carter Langston. Dr. Carter gave a small, apologetic smile. I'm sorry for the surprise. Mr. Langston insisted on attending today's appointment. He said you may have forgotten to let me know otherwise. Evelyn's heart pounded. Her thoughts scrambled as she tried to steady her breath. The air in the room suddenly felt thinner, her pulse echoing like a drumbeat in her ears. She tightened her grip on the paper gown draped over her knees, steeling herself. Carter stood in the doorway, rain-soaked and disheveled. His eyes were soft, almost pleading. I just wanted to make sure everything was okay with the baby, he said quietly. Please let me stay. I won't say anything. I won't argue. A storm of emotions surged within her. Part of her was livid. How dare he show up, uninvited, after everything? After she had fought to create space and clarity? The nerve? The gall? after nights spent crying alone while he chased distractions that didn't carry his name or his child. And yet, another part of her, the part that still remembered the way he lit up during that first ultrasound, wavered. She could still hear the joy in his laugh that day, feel the warmth of his hand on hers as they watched the heartbeat flicker on screen, a memory sharp as glass, cutting through her resolve. She met Dr. Carter's gaze, unsure. "It's entirely your decision," the doctor said gently. "If you'd prefer I ask him to wait outside, I will." Evelyn's jaw clenched, but she gave a faint nod. "He can stay." Her voice was tight, controlled. Carter took a seat near the exam table, folding his hands in his lap with a silence uncharacteristic of him. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by something far more uncertain, regret wrapped in quiet desperation. Carter moved through the appointment, checking measurements, asking about symptoms, monitoring Evelyn's vitals, while Carter sat stone still, his eyes flicking between Evelyn's face and the fetal monitor. Then came the soft, whooshing sound of the baby's heartbeat. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. That sound, steady and strong, felt like a lifeline, a tether to something purer than the chaos they had created. Tears stung her eyes, and despite herself, she caught a glimpse of Carter's face, his own eyes glistening, emotion breaking through the surface. For a second, she could almost remember what it felt like to believe in the future they had once planned. But as soon as the appointment ended, her resolve snapped back into place. She pulled her coat tightly around her and prepared to leave, her mind already racing to get out before Carter could say anything more. This had been her space, her safe zone. He had intruded, even if unintentionally. As Dr. Carter exited, Evelyn slid off the exam table, moving toward the door. But Carter stepped in front of it, not aggressively, just enough to show he had something to say. "Thank you for letting me stay," he said, his voice low, aware of the busy hallway outside. "I know you didn't have to." Evelyn kept her eyes on her coat zipper, fingers working it up slowly. "Don't read too much into it," she replied flatly. "I just didn't want a scene in the middle of a hospital." Carter nodded, sorrow etched across his face. "I get it," he said, voice low. "But there's something I need you to hear, Ev." He paused, as if searching for the exact arrangement of words that wouldn't crumble on impact. "I'm not fighting you because I want revenge," he said carefully. "I'm fighting for us, because I can't imagine my life without you, or our baby." Evelyn's expression tightened. Her anger, sharp and pulsing, surged forward to drown out any hint of vulnerability. "You couldn't imagine life without us," she echoed, her voice trembling. "Then why did you throw everything away, for one night, or however many nights, with someone else?" Carter winced. The memory of that careless, short-lived affair stabbed at him. What had felt thrilling for a moment had left scorched earth behind. "I was weak. I got caught up in ego. The attention, the escape, it felt good for a second, but I never stopped loving you." Evelyn instinctively placed a hand over her belly, drawing strength from the life growing within her. "You have a twisted way of showing love, Carter." Tears threatened at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back, determined not to unravel in front of him. "Let's not pretend a single apology or showing up at one doctor's appointment changes anything. I've already filed the divorce papers. You'll get them soon enough." Carter's shoulders slumped. He raked a hand through his damp hair, his breath shallow. "What if—" "Just hear me out. What if we tried counseling? I'll do whatever it takes. I'll cut my hours, cut people out, stop going to events, all of it, I swear." But Evelyn's mind flashed to too many nights lying awake alone, missed calls, voicemails, half-hearted excuses whispered in the morning. "I asked you to go to therapy months ago," she said, her voice brittle. "You laughed, said we didn't need some stranger meddling in our marriage." Carter's eyes shone with regret. "I was a damn fool." She exhaled slowly, her chest tight. "You still are. If you think I can forget what you did." With that, Evelyn stepped around him and walked into the hallway. The bustling hospital scene, the hum of monitors, the clipped steps of nurses, families chatting in waiting rooms, felt bizarrely normal compared to the chaos churning in her chest. Carter called her name once, softly, but she didn't look back. There was no space left for him in the path she was walking now. Back at Naomi's apartment, Evelyn shut herself in the guest room, a manila folder of legal documents spread out on the bed beside her. Rachel Torres had sent them over that morning, formal petitions, affidavits outlining Carter's infidelity, and detailed financial disclosures mapping out his entire portfolio. She scanned through them, every page reinforcing the harsh reality ahead. Divorce, custody, rebuilding. A tangle of emotions, grief, strength, anxiety, tightened in her chest. A soft knock on the door. Naomi peeked in, eyes filled with concern. "You okay?" Evelyn set the papers aside and nodded, though her face told a different story. "No," Evelyn admitted softly, "but I'm doing what needs to be done." Naomi sat down beside her on the edge of the bed, offering a gentle squeeze on her shoulder. "I heard you mention to Dr. Carter that Carter showed up at your appointment. That must have been a lot." Evelyn gave a slow nod. "He's begging for another chance. Therapy. Less work. Promises to stop disappearing at night. You know, all the things I asked for months ago." Her voice carried the weight of someone who had clung to hope too long. Her eyes, tired and glassy, flickered with the remnants of exhaustion that no sleep could cure. Naomi exhaled, a sad sigh. People only start seeing clearly when they're about to lose something. That's the painful part. Evelyn looked down at her hands, her voice barely above a whisper. "He sees it now, maybe, but it's too late. I'm worn down, Naomi. I can't keep playing tug-of-war with his affection, trying to hold together a version of him that never really stayed." Her fingers trembled as she spoke, clutching the hem of her sweater as if it were the only thing anchoring her to the moment. The silence between them was heavy, filled with years of dreams unraveling. Naomi wrapped her arms around her in a quiet, firm embrace. "You won't go through this alone," she said gently. "We'll make a plan, for you and the baby, whatever it takes." The steadiness in Naomi's voice was like a balm. It was the first time in days Evelyn felt like someone else was carrying part of the weight with her. Just as they pulled apart, Evelyn's phone rang. She glanced down and froze. The number flashing on the screen was from her hometown, her mother. Her heart skipped. The conversation she'd been dreading had arrived. She shot Naomi a look, wordless but filled with silent plea, and then answered. "Hi, Mom," she said, voice cracking. There was no soft way to explain what had happened. I need to tell you something about me and Carter." Her mother, Evelyn Monroe, greeted her with warmth and concern, but that quickly gave way to shock and devastation as Evelyn explained everything. Her voice shook as she spoke. The affair, the divorce, the pregnancy. She could hear the hope drain from her mother's voice, each word making the miles between them feel even greater. Margaret's heartbreak was audible even over the line. She asked a stream of questions, each one a dagger Evelyn had tried to avoid. "How long has this been going on? Why didn't you tell me sooner? Are you sure there's no chance to work it out?" Each question chipped away at Evelyn's composure, but she answered as best she could, even through her guilt. She felt like a child again, ashamed, vulnerable, aching for comfort she wasn't sure she deserved. By the end, her mother was weeping softly. "Come home, Ev," she pleaded. "Let's figure this out together." Evelyn promised she would think about it. But the thought of leaving the city, the place where she had built her career, her independence, felt daunting. The idea of going back felt both like sanctuary and surrender, and she wasn't sure which one she needed more. After the call ended, she leaned against the wall, tears slipping down her face, her body sagging under the weight of it all. Her mother's heartbreak, the legal mess, the uncertainty of raising a child alone. Naomi silently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Storms don't last forever," she said. "You're doing the right thing," Naomi said gently, "even if it hurts." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, an eerie echo of the storm swirling inside Evelyn's chest. Yet even amid the grief and guilt, she clung to a grounding truth. She was free now, free to carve out a life without deception, without walking on emotional eggshells. 2 weeks later, Los Angeles moved on as if nothing had changed. But for Evelyn, everything had. She remained at Naomi's apartment, slowly piecing together a new version of normal. Morning walks helped ease the aches of pregnancy. Afternoons were spent combing through legal documents with Rachel Torres, and in the evenings she curled up on the sofa, her thoughts drifting between anxiety and hope for what was to come. Rachel had arranged a mediation session, a procedural step required before finalizing the divorce. Both sides, with their attorneys, would attempt to settle outside of court. Evelyn had mixed feelings. She dreaded seeing Carter face to face again. But she also hoped this could accelerate her release from the marriage. On the morning of mediation, she stood in front of the mirror in Naomi's guest room. She wore a simple navy maternity dress, comfortable but strong, a quiet signal of her resolve. She placed her hand on her belly. A small kick met her palm. "We'll get through this," she whispered. The mediator's office sat high in a downtown skyscraper, its minimalist design all glass, metal, and quiet authority. Evelyn entered the room with Rachel beside her. They were guided into a sleek conference room, its wide window revealing a city that seemed wholly indifferent to the turmoil of its people. Carter was already there, seated across the room beside Atticus Hart. He stood when she entered. His eyes, full of conflicted emotion, searched her face. But Evelyn didn't return the look. She calmly set her purse on her chair and sat down. The mediator, Daphne Morales, introduced herself with a practiced grace. She laid out the rules: respect, openness, and a willingness to resolve rather than inflame. Her composed voice briefly tempered the tension. Rachel spoke first. She clearly outlined Evelyn's grounds for divorce: infidelity, emotional neglect, and the need for long-term financial security, especially with a child on the way. She requested substantial alimony, full child support, and sole occupancy of the marital penthouse until the baby reached 1 year old. Carter's brow twitched. But to his credit, he said nothing, restraining whatever urge might have once prompted him to interrupt. When Atticus took the floor, he didn't deny Carter's betrayal. He acknowledged it as a regrettable lapse in judgment. But he urged Evelyn to consider reconciliation. He offered a compromise: a reduced alimony period, moderate child support, and shared custody once the baby was born. That last phrase, shared custody, hit Evelyn like a punch to the chest. Her fingers tightened on the armrest. Evelyn pictured the baby's crib in one home, then another, back and forth. 2 addresses, 2 routines. An infant too young to understand the weight of that disjointed existence. The thought hollowed her. It wasn't just logistics, it was the unraveling of the stability she once promised her child. She imagined the confusion, the ache, the quiet questions the baby would never know how to ask. The hours inched by as they exchanged proposals and counter-proposals. Carter tried more than once to speak directly to her, but Rachel kept the process formal and by the book. Every interaction passed through the proper channels. Tension hung heavy in the air, broken only by Daphne's composed voice urging cooperation. By late afternoon, they had the shell of an agreement. Carter would provide a significant monthly support payment. Evelyn would retain exclusive occupancy of the penthouse for 1 year, after which the property would be sold, and the profits split. In return, he requested generous visitation rights and joint legal custody for all major decisions. The idea of sharing such critical choices with him made Evelyn's stomach churn. But she also knew, deep down, that their child deserved to know their father. Even if he hadn't earned her trust back, even if she still woke up some nights with tears dried on her cheeks, this wasn't about her pain anymore. It was about the life growing inside her. They left the mediation drained, no signatures exchanged yet, but a rough path now sketched out. Inside the elevator, Evelyn leaned against the mirrored wall, her body heavy with fatigue. "It's only the beginning," Rachel reminded her. "But this is a good sign. He's engaging, not resisting." Evelyn gave a small nod, resting her hand on her belly. For the first time, she felt like the fog might lift. That maybe, just maybe, there was an endpoint ahead. Her reflection stared back at her from the elevator glass. Not the woman who once clung to fairy tale endings, but someone stronger, tempered by reality. Whether Carter would hold to his promises or sabotage them later, she didn't know. But one truth remained unshakable. She would never again sacrifice her dignity or her child's security in the name of loyalty. Over the next month, mediation continued, through emails, long phone calls, and the occasional in-person session with Daphne. Slowly, the contours of their divorce settlement took shape. It wasn't perfect. Neither party walked away completely satisfied. Carter, still clinging to flickers of hope, tried to breach the boundary with personal appeals. But every time he did, Evelyn stayed firm. "This is a legal process," she'd say evenly, "not therapy." She had mourned the relationship in silence long before the paperwork had begun. She wasn't angry anymore, just resolute. Then, one crisp morning, Evelyn's phone rang. It was Rachel. "We have a court date," she said. 1 week from today, that's when we finalize everything. Evelyn's heart thudded in her chest. Relief rushed in, finally, an end to the purgatory. But behind it, a wave of sadness lingered too. The last threads of a marriage about to be officially severed. This wasn't how Evelyn had envisioned family life. Not once had she imagined standing alone, pregnant, negotiating custody arrangements in court. And yet, beneath the sorrow, a calm certainty anchored her. She had to protect her child from an unstable, toxic environment, whatever it took. The morning of the final hearing broke cold and gray. A thin mist clung to the city as Evelyn dressed with intention. Her tailored black maternity dress was simple but strong, projecting quiet resolve. Naomi walked beside her, unwavering in support as they approached the courthouse, a grand neoclassical building, its stone columns rising solemnly into the overcast sky. Outside, Rachel Torres was waiting, her demeanor as composed as ever. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. Carter and Atticus Hart sat across the aisle, both dressed in somber suits. Their faces were unreadable. A few onlookers, curious bystanders, and a couple of local reporters occupied the benches. Evelyn took her seat and tried to steady her breath. Her hands rested over her belly, where the baby stirred gently. Nerves? Or a reminder of what truly mattered? The judge entered, and everyone stood. Formalities began. Names read, legal identities confirmed, an overview of the divorce terms presented aloud. Evelyn kept her eyes on the judge's steady expression, avoiding Carter's gaze. The courtroom fell quiet as the judge outlined the final settlement: alimony, child support, custody terms, and property division. "Do both parties agree to these terms?" he asked. Carter cleared his throat. For a moment, Evelyn's heart skipped. Was he going to contest? But his voice, when it came, was low and subdued. "I agree, Your Honor." Then the judge turned to her. "Ms. Monroe, do you concur?" Evelyn exhaled. A complex swirl of grief and relief stirred in her chest. "Yes, Your Honor," she said. Her voice didn't shake. With that, the gavel struck. Their marriage, once admired by society pages, was officially dissolved. Camera flashes blinked from the gallery, capturing the end of what had once been a golden union. As the judge exited, Evelyn and Carter stood amid the shifting crowd in the corridor. For the first time in what felt like ages, their eyes met. In Carter's expression she saw pain, and she knew it mirrored her own. But the path had been chosen. His through betrayal, hers through self-preservation. A single tear slipped down Evelyn's cheek, which she quickly wiped away. Then, with her head held high, she turned and walked toward the exit. Each step was a quiet declaration. I reclaim my future. 1 week later, on a crisp, sunlit morning, Evelyn awoke in Naomi's apartment. Her divorce was officially recorded in the court's ledger, and for the first time in months she felt not sorrow, but possibility. It felt like she had shed an unbearable weight. Yes, she was still pregnant. Yes, there were challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long while, Evelyn felt like herself again. No longer overshadowed by Carter's betrayals, she was reclaiming her identity, redefining her future. The mirror no longer reflected a woman bound by disillusion. It showed resilience, a survivor tracing her own outline from the shards. She moved quietly through Naomi's apartment, preparing a simple breakfast of toast and orange juice. Naomi had already left for work, but left behind a handwritten note on the kitchen table. "You're stronger than you know. Keep going." Evelyn smiled at the gesture, then sat down and opened her laptop. Her inbox chimed with a message from Rachel Torres. Final filing confirmed. Judgment of divorce signed and submitted. It was official. Truly over. A final period to a chapter that once promised eternity. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, not out of hesitation, but reverence. For what had ended, and for what would begin. Her phone buzzed. A new message from Carter. "I know the marriage is over, but I'd like to be there for the next prenatal appointment. Let me know if that's okay." The emotions came in waves. Disbelief, wariness, a whisper of hope, and the steady, unwavering instinct to protect her child above all. The agreement granted him the right to be present for major milestones. And while Evelyn could sense real remorse in his message, she knew rebuilding trust wasn't a switch that could be flipped. She typed slowly, carefully. "The appointment is next Thursday at 2 p.m. If you want to come, show up. I won't stop you." After pressing send, she sat still, inhaled deeply. Forgiveness wasn't a door she was ready to open, but boundaries, firm, calm, necessary, would guard her steps forward. Her priority was their child. And if Carter wanted to be a father, she'd give him the chance. But always under her terms, always under her watchful care. Later, Evelyn began researching apartments online. She had enough from the settlement to get a fresh start. Part of her yearned for a quiet place in Brooklyn, not far from where she first fell in love with the city's rhythm. Another part considered her childhood hometown. A slower life, simpler days, peace. For now, she had time and options, and that, she decided, was enough. The open road didn't frighten her anymore. It felt like possibility. That evening, she curled up on the sofa, flipping through a baby name book. Adeline, Sebastian, Eliana, Jude. She smiled, imagining a life that belonged solely to her and her child, a future untouched by betrayal, a future where love was no longer begged for, but built from wholeness. A quiet wave of gratitude crept in. The pain had shaped her, but it hadn't broken her. Evelyn Monroe's story is a powerful reminder. Even the most dazzling love stories can fracture under the weight of deception. What began as a fairy tale ended in betrayal. But through heartbreak, legal hurdles, and immense emotional reckoning, Evelyn found something far more precious: her voice, her independence, and her strength as a mother. So the story is over, our wonderful friends. Are you still here at this hour? If you are, then something in Evelyn's journey must have touched a part of your heart. Maybe it echoed a struggle of your own, or reminded you of someone you love. Either way, take a deep breath with me right now, because what Evelyn's story leaves us with is a truth we often forget. Life doesn't fall apart in a single moment. It unravels slowly through overlooked signs and silenced intuition. But healing? That too is a process, and it begins with one brave decision: to choose yourself, to protect your peace, to say, "I am worth more." Evelyn's strength wasn't in how loudly she fought, but in how quietly she rebuilt. That's the lesson. You don't need permission to begin again. You don't need applause to walk away from what breaks you. As author Cheryl Strayed once said, "You don't have a right to the cards you believe you should have been dealt, but you do have a responsibility to play the hell out of the ones you're holding." So whether you're grieving, healing, or still unsure where to start, this is your sign. Take the next small step. Reclaim your voice. Define your own ending. And if Evelyn's story moved you, if it gave you courage or comfort, please like this video, share it with someone who might need it too, and don't forget to subscribe. There are more stories ahead, and we want you here for all of them. You're stronger than you know. And your next chapter? It's waiting. With love. Until next time.